With me now is president of the Article 3 Project, Mike Davis. Mike, good to see you.
Thank you for having me.
Of course, now you've been a very busy man the last few days, big part of the transition into the Trump administration, which, by the way, is already very exciting. A lot of great appointments that have come down from President Trump, President-elect Trump. But let me ask you, there have been some, I would say rumors, but it's a little bit stronger, a little bit more substantiated than a rumor, that you're going to play a role in the Department of Justice. Your name's even been floated for possible attorney general. What can you tell us about this?
I would say this. I was the chief counsel for nominations on the Senate Judiciary Committee, Liz, where we confirmed the attorney general, judges, justices, other Justice Department officials. I would say there is a snowball's chance in hell that I would get confirmed to anything. We would need 100 Republican senators, and I still probably would not get confirmed. I would get one charity vote from my former boss, Chuck Grassley, the incoming chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee, and it would ruin his 65-year political career. So I am not going to be the attorney general. I am not going into government. I've been there. I've done that. And I'm very happily going to be Trump's biggest defender through the Article 3 project like I have been for the last 5 years.
So what you describe, I mean, I know you describe it in a humorous way, but it actually is a problem that some people associated with Trump are going to have. And this is not because of their association with Trump. This is because of either what rhinos the Republicans in the Senate are, or what fierce, dishonest opposition we have in the left, that they're not going to be able to get confirmed. Like, for example, RFK, they're saying the same thing. Like, could he be Secretary of Health and Human Services? Well, maybe not, because would he actually be able to be confirmed by the United States Senate? We don't know that. So what does that look like for people that Trump wants to surround himself with, but is unable to get them confirmed?
Look, the Senate should give the president the cabinet he chooses, unless there is a very good reason to oppose a particular nominee. The president won the election. He gets to pick his executive branch officials. And so long as they're competent, they're qualified, the Senate should give the president who he wants.
Because it seems to me the alternative is President Trump is still going to have RFK close to him. It's just going to end up being a shadow cabinet versus a confirmed cabinet.
Yeah, that could be the case. Now, I will say it's important to get these cabinet picks in place because under the Vacancy Act, under various federal statutes, it's the agency head, it's the cabinet secretary or the agency director who has the power under statute to do things or not do things. So it's very important that the Senate confirm President Trump's cabinet as quickly as possible. Do not delay this like they dragged their feet the last time when they got duped by the Russian collusion hoax. And, you know, that even the Republicans were spun up thinking that Trump was a Russian asset. I hope they're not stupid enough this time to fall for this.
No, because what would happen in that case is that the deep staters that are already in place in some of these agencies, but aren't the political appointees, meaning not the ones that step down or can be fired, they'll be the ones effectively running the agency if you don't confirm Trump's picks here. So, I mean, it's an interesting thing here. So we've had a couple of appointments in the administration that I want your take on. President Trump announced Chief of Staff Susie Wiles, who was his campaign manager. She obviously ran a very effective campaign. Although there are some critics of her that say, well, she was a pharma lobbyist. She at least owned a lobbying company that was into pharma lobbying. There's Stephen Miller. He's been announced today as the Deputy Chief of Staff for Policy. And then we have Tom Homan for Border Czar. What's your take on these?
Annalise Stefanik for the UN.
Oh, Annalise Stefanik.
Yeah, yes. So Trump went 4 for 4. This is a grand slam by President Trump. I've worked with Susie Wiles as a volunteer for Trump's campaign as one of Trump's top legal surrogates. Susie is a phenomenal pick for White House Chief of Staff. She understands her job is not to control Trump. It's her job to control everything else around Trump. So Trump can be Trump, and he has a functioning campaign operation and a functioning White House. Here's a dirty secret. People always pretend like Trump is sexist or whatever the hell they claim. It's just utter nonsense. I've seen Trump around Susie, and they get along very well. It's very clear that President Trump respects Susie, and he does very well with women. Trump had one of the first, I think the first female executive in the construction industry back in the 90s who worked for Trump for like 18 years. Trump gets along very well with his female executives. This is the first female White House chief of staff. And just by how Susie ran Trump's campaign, she's going to run the White House very effectively for President Trump. Stephen Miller's a fantastic pick for White House deputy chief of staff for policy. He's been a loyalist to President Trump for a long time. He's been the tip of the spear on immigration. He's going to be fantastic in that role. Tom Homan's great as the borders are. He'll work hand in glove with Susie and Stephen to make sure we close our border and deport these illegal immigrants, starting with the violent criminals first and then moving on to the rest. And Elise Stefanik is phenomenal. I can't think of a better pick for the ambassador, the President Trump's ambassador to the UN. She's going to go in there and bring much needed reforms to a broken institution. In particular, she's going to make sure that we're not funding this anti-Semitic rot at the UN. So Trump went 4 for 4 so far.
And it's so much fun to see. Okay, we're going to talk about the Department of Justice, which I know is your wheelhouse, and how exactly that can be reformed in a minute. But I have to ask you about the Senate Majority Leadership fight that's going on right now. There's supposed to be a secret ballot. I mean, in my opinion, the audacity of these senators who go there to represent us, thinking that they can cast their ballots in a way that they have no accountability to us, the voters, in choosing their leader who will determine the legislative agenda of the Senate, obviously either in cooperation with President Trump or not. We have John Thune from South Dakota, John Cornyn from Texas, and Rick Scott from Florida. Cornyn and Thune are Mitch McConnell's henchmen. Rick Scott has said that he wants to help facilitate President Trump's agenda. There was a list that was leaked, a whip count of which senators are voting for which of these three men. Now, I know that there's some question about whether this list is authentic. In my opinion, if the viewers are wondering, it is accurate enough to do its work to show us which senator might be voting for which of these candidates so that we, the people, can hold our own senators accountable to their vote. But tell me about this a little bit. I mean, this was something McConnell seemed to have set up even before Trump won.
So I was a staffer in the Senate. I was the chief counsel for nominations on the Senate Judiciary Committee. I worked very closely with these senators on judicial nominations. I think they're all great on judicial nominations. They have different styles, different approaches. I would say this is, it's an interesting fight. These senators get very territorial about their prerogative on how they're going to vote. And from my perspective, it seemed unless and until President Trump weighs in on this Senate race, I'll probably not get out in front of my skis on this particular one. For one time in my life, I will actually show restraint.
I'm shocked, Mike. I'm shocked by this answer. I expected you to be more based than I am and list everything that John Thune has done that makes him a rhino, and John Cornyn everything that he's done that's made him a rhino. Well, let me tell everybody watching and listening, you guys know my opinion on this. You know that I think Rick Scott is actually not the most based senator in the United States Senate, but compared to John Cornyn and John Thune, he is quite something. I understand, by the way, and I don't want to put words in your mouth. I understand that people outside the administration who are working with the administration might potentially have to work with whoever is the Senate Majority Leader, and they don't want to burn bridges. But I don't have that. I don't have that constraint. So you're going to get my unfiltered opinion on this stuff. Okay, talk about Department of Justice. Whether we're talking about the FBI, whether we're talking about DOJ in general, whether we're talking about Special Counsel Jack Smith, prosecutions of Trump, what exactly is the procedure for what needs to happen to clean up this mess once and for all?
Once again, I want to make very clear, I am not going back into government. I'm not going to be the Attorney General. I am very happy running the Article 3 project. And as a private citizen running the Article 3 project, I will very strongly advocate for serious reforms at the Justice Department. The Justice Department has been politicized and weaponized against President Trump, his top aides like Steve Bannon and Peter Navarro, who got sent to prison, his supporters on January 6th, who were politically persecuted. Yes, persecuted. According to the Supreme Court's Fisher ruling last June, the Biden-Harris Justice Department has been weaponized to go after parents outraged by gender chaos in schools and the resulting rapes in high school bathrooms. They've gone after Christians praying at abortion clinics, including putting a 75-year-old Christian in prison for praying at an abortion clinic, while the Biden-Harris Justice Department has given amnesty to Joe Biden, Hunter Biden, every scumbag Biden, it seems, who is on a foreign payroll. Over $20 million has gone from these foreign adversaries, including our worst enemies, into what seems like every Biden family member's bank accounts. James Comer, the House Oversight Chairman, has the bank records, clear corruption. They've given amnesty to BLM and Antifa and Hamas rioters. BLM and Antifa were a hell of a lot more deadly and destructive than January 6th. And Hamas, they're terrorizing Jewish Americans all over this country, including on college campuses, and they're getting amnesty. They're given amnesty to abortion industry activists, these Planned Parenthood activists who are terrorizing crisis pregnancy centers. These trans terrorists are going after Catholic churches. I mean, this has to end. We cannot have a politicized and weaponized justice system. They tried to bankrupt Trump. They tried to throw him in prison for the rest of his life for non-crimes. They tried to take him off the ballot unconstitutionally. They tried to take off his head by underfunding his Secret Service protection. And then Joe Biden saying that Trump is the gravest danger to democracy and must be stopped at all costs. There has to be accountability for what happens. And that accountability has to come at the Justice Department. Jack Smith and his office need to be fired on day one. These January 6th units throughout the Justice Department, including the FBI and the DC U.S. Attorney's Office, need to be closed down immediately. Those prosecutors and agents need to be reassigned to real crimes, like violent crimes that are running rampant throughout our cities, the migrant invasion and the resulting crimes and chaos. We have to end this. We have to end this politicized and weaponized justice system, and that's going to come through accountability. We need to have probes through the Justice Department's Office of Inspector General, the Office of Professional Responsibility, the Criminal Division. We need to have probes through the House Judiciary Committee with Chairman Jim Jordan, the Senate Judiciary Committee with incoming Chairman Chuck Grassley, my former boss, who's the all-star at oversight and who will continue that oversight, the appropriations committees, and the House and Senate, the oversight committees. This is what Biden and Harris did to politicize, and frankly, it started under Obama with Crossfire Hurricane. There has to be accountability. People need to be prosecuted. People need to be fired. People need to be reassigned. This could never happen again.
So what does that mean on day one? Because a lot of times when you're talking about the oversight committees in the House and Senate, I think that's good. They oftentimes seem to take a long time to do their investigations and to host hearings. And many times there's no accountability that comes from them. When Trump goes in office on day one, what directives can he give to the Justice Department? Does he have the authority to fire Jack Smith? Does he have the authority to fire some of these other deep staters? Like, what can be done day one?
Yeah, President Trump is the president of the United States elected by all Americans. He is the head of the executive branch, and everyone in the executive branch reports to the president of the United States, including the attorney general and every Justice Department employee. And you're hearing these people talking about Justice Department employees essentially thwarting the president's lawful orders. And I'll say this, their job is to carry out all of the president's lawful orders, all of his policy directives. If they disagree with the president on a policy matter, they should resign and they can run for Congress. But until then, their job is to follow every lawful order of the president of the United States. And if they don't, they could be obstructing justice, a very serious federal crime. So I hope these Justice Department employees who think they're going to subvert the will of the American people, who are going to undermine the duly elected president of the United States, I hope they understand that it's not going to happen again this time. I can't imagine an attorney general allowing that to happen again this time. And at the Article 3 Project, as a private citizen, I will name and shame these people and call for their investigations, their terminations, their prosecutions.
Well, wouldn't that be an interesting accountability structure if refusing to follow the order of a president or impeding his directive resulted in criminal prosecution for obstruction of justice versus what they claim they're going to waive civil service protections and say you can't fire me. I'm part of the administrative state and you don't have authority to terminate me. I'm basically just cushioning my job. You can only fire me for cause. That's what they're going to claim.
Well, that might be what they can claim under the statute, but I think that claim under the statute may run into Article 2 of the Constitution that gives all executive power to the President of the United States, and that executive power includes the power to hire and fire. So I would say this, number one, I think the President has the constitutional power to hire and fire anyone he wants, subject to Senate confirmation of officers. I would also say this: if you are being insubordinate to the President of the United States, that's for cause. You could be fired for cause for that, and you could be prosecuted and face other very severe legal repercussions if you're obstructing justice.
I hope the president does this. I said to you off air, and I've said this, I mean, I've said it on air before. I think one of President Trump's mistakes in his first administration was not prosecuting Hillary Clinton. And I know maybe he walked in thinking, listen, we're going to let bygones be bygones. Now that she's not president, she won't hurt anybody. She has no power. But it turns out not holding her accountable empowered and emboldened the left. And I hope he does this time around. I hope he does hold people accountable. What about the prosecutions, both criminal and civil, against him, whether it's Letitia James, whether it's Fani Willis, whether it's Jack Smith? What happens to those now that he is president-elect?
So the American people have heard all of this evidence and all of these arguments against President Trump for the last 2.5 years since the Mar-a-Lago raid and the subsequent 4 indictments of Trump, along with the indictment of by the Arizona Attorney General, where Trump is named as an unindicted co-conspirator. The American people delivered their verdict on Tuesday, and they voted in a landslide to put President Trump back in the White House. And these Democrat prosecutors in New York, D.C., Atlanta, and Arizona need to stop being election deniers. They need to understand that the American people get to decide elections not through their lawfare and election interference, but by voting. The American people voted. They delivered their verdict, rendered their verdict, and it's time for all of these cases to go away immediately.
So what's the procedure, though, for that to happen? Because you and I agree on that. Most people watching this agree on that. Most reasonable Democrats, voters, actually agree on that, too. But we know that there are zealots on the other side, people who are so blinded by Trump derangement syndrome that they essentially cheered when President Trump was targeted for assassination twice. Those people are not going to adhere to norms. They're not going to respect our vote. They might continue to try to put President Trump in prison. Is there legal recourse for Trump now that he has been elected president to stop these prosecutions, to stop them coming after him?
Yeah, I mean, the Constitution, the case law is very clear. You can't prosecute a sitting president of the United States. So at a minimum, they're going to have to halt all these cases for President Trump's 4 years in office. But I would say this, they need to drop these cases. And Trump's attorney general, whoever he picks, I strongly recommend that attorney general open a criminal probe on day one when he's after that attorney general is confirmed, or the acting attorney general can do it on day one, a criminal probe under 18 USC section 241, conspiracy against rights. It is a very serious federal civil rights felony. It's one of the charges that Jack Smith brought against President Trump for January 6th in DC. It's a bogus charge. It's not a crime for Trump to object to a presidential election. It's allowed by the Electoral Count Act of 1887, along with the First Amendment. You don't see Democrats prosecuted for objecting to Republican wins in 1968, 2000, 2004, 2016. Do we see Al Gore or John Kerry or Hillary Clinton in jail for objecting to Republican wins? So look, nothing President Trump did on January 6th was a crime. The only way it would have been a crime is if Trump incited the riot on January 6th that was a lawful protest permitted by the National Park Service that devolved into a riot. And if you can't prove that Trump incited that riot under the Brandenburg Supreme Court standard, there's no crime. And they haven't charged Trump with inciting a riot. They haven't charged Trump with insurrection. This case needs to go away. The case down in Georgia with Fannie Willis needs to go away. Another January 6th case. The Fulton County case, that needs to go away. The New York case with Alvin Bragg and Matthew Colangelo and Judge Mershon, that case needs to go away. And I think tomorrow, Judge Mershon is going to decide whether he's going to declare a mistrial in the Bragg case. This is the case where Trump was charged with 34 campaign finance felonies for settling a nuisance claim and putting that expense in his private books as a legal expense. I've been a lawyer for almost 20 years. I don't know what the hell else you would call it other than a legal expense. I've settled these nuisance claims repeatedly on behalf of clients, and it's just absolutely ridiculous that he was charged. There are many legal errors with this case. The most pressing one is that they admitted evidence in this case subject to presidential immunity. The Supreme Court in June held that not only can the president not be charged for his official acts, not his personal acts, you can't charge a president for his official acts, you also can't take evidence that's subject to presidential immunity. And that's exactly what they did in New York with this Soros-funded Manhattan DA Alvin Bragg and this Biden-Harris political operative Matthew Colangelo and this corrupt Democrat judge Juan Mershon, whose daughter Lauren Mershon's raising money off of this case, requiring his recusal. They let in evidence of Hope Hicks's conversations with President Trump when she was the White House Deputy Chief of Staff for communications, along with Madeline, the Deputy Chief of Staff for Operations, clearly subject to presidential immunity, clearly relevant to the case. Otherwise, why would the Bragg and Colangelo fought so hard with Mershon to let in this evidence? So they have to declare a mistrial in this case. This case should go away. If Mershon does not declare a mistrial, if he proceeds to sentencing on January 6th and tries to put the president-elect of the United States in Rikers Island instead of letting him go back to the White House, the Supreme Court of the United States will step in very, very quickly and end this, right? And then
is that what would happen procedurally if the judge does not declare a mistrial? If he proceeds to sentencing, then Trump could appeal that to the U.S. Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court could declare a mistrial?
So you have to, there's one step you have to go through. You have to go through one step and exhaust your remedies through the New York system. And that means you go to a Manhattan judge, another New York County judge, any of them, and ask for a stay of execution of judgment. If they say no, he has exhausted all remedies in New York, and then Trump can go straight to the Supreme Court of the United States on the emergency docket. I have zero doubt the Supreme Court will step in and stop this if it gets that far. I hope that Judge Mershon does not let it get this far, because he has so much legal exposure in this case with his clear conflict of interest with his daughter Lauren raising money off this case. Under New York statute, Judge Mershon was required to recuse. That's not just Mike Davis saying this. A former federal Clinton judge went on Caitlin Collins' show on April 5th, I believe, on CNN and said that, yes, Judge Mershon had to recuse. And what did Judge Mershon do in response? He didn't recuse. He put an illegal, unconstitutional gag order on Trump and said that if Trump mentions this recusal issue again, he's going to put Trump in prison.
So what do you expect tomorrow? Do you expect that he will declare a mistrial, or do you think that he's blinded by Trump derangement syndrome?
I think he's blinded by Trump derangement syndrome, but I think that he has to see the writing on the wall after this election. He sees that even the Biden-Harris Justice Department with Jack Smith are cutting bait after the election. I think Mershon is going to declare a mistrial. I hope so, because he will do serious damage to our country if he does not declare a mistrial and make this case go away. Let's point this out about Jack Smith, why his case was so obviously lawfare and election interference, so corrupt, so illegal under Justice Department regulations, under criminal statutes. Remember, Jack Smith said all along to courts, to the Supreme Court, to Chutkin, to the DC Circuit Court, elections be damned, elections are irrelevant, the elections don't matter, we're going to prosecute this case no matter what, in violation of Justice Department policy that's very clear that you can't make prosecutorial decisions based upon the election. And then guess what? He gets slammed by the Supreme Court on presidential immunity. He goes full steam ahead. And then right after the election, Jack Smith leaks out that he's going to shut down his office. That makes it very clear. It proves the point that Jack Smith was only doing this to interfere with the election.
Yeah, and it's one of the reasons that I hate that some of these swamp creatures just like crawl back into their little swampy hole and don't actually face any accountability for what they did. Is there any accountability that Jack Smith could face?
Yes, absolutely. He should face probes by the Justice Department's Office of Professional Responsibility, by the Justice Department's Office of Inspector General, and by the Justice Department's Criminal Division, right? Because we're looking at serious violations of the law by Jack Smith in his office. He should also face very serious probes by the House Judiciary Committee, led by Chairman Jim Jordan, the Senate Judiciary Committee, that's going to be led by by Chuck Grassley, the king of oversight, by the House and Senate Appropriations Committees, by the oversight committees in the House and Senate. There must be accountability. There has to be investigations. There has to be accountability, so this never happens again. These are
Right.
republic-ending tactics. This lawfare and election interference. This is how the Roman Republic fell. It was the lawfare by the Roman insiders against Caesar that caused him to feel desperate and cross the Rubicon from Gaul into Rome. It led to the Civil War and the fall of the Roman Republic. I'm not saying this is going into a civil war, but what has happened with this lawfare and election interference is it could lead to a legal tit for tat between the parties that will lead to the destruction of the presidency and therefore the destruction of our republic. There must be accountability. This must end forever.
It's also a matter of deterrence.
Yes.
If these Democrats or these officials who we know are Democrats and they're engaging in lawfare against the president, if they unlawfully engage in lawfare and then when President Trump wins, they just kind of back off because they're like, okay, we have to go back in our hole for 4 years. But as soon as we get power again, we're going to abuse it. They're just going to be emboldened. They are going to abuse it again as soon as they have that power, unless they have some fear that they will be taken away from their jobs. They will be put in prison. They will face legal ramifications. They have to fear the repercussions. It's like disciplining a toddler, right? You have to have consequences for their behavior. Otherwise, they're just going to cool their heels until they feel the opportunity arises again for them to misbehave.
Yeah, let's talk about what this is all about. This is all about Crossfire Hurricane, right?
Yeah.
And this is going to take a few minutes. Crossfire Hurricane was that was a federal investigation that started with Hillary Clinton with her illegal home server unsecured as the Secretary of State. Not only did it have our nation's most classified secrets, it also had evidence of the Clinton Foundation's illegal pay-for-play foreign bribery schemes, where the Clinton Foundation was taking tens of billions of dollars from foreign governments, foreign entities, and maybe, just maybe, there was quid pro quo corruption when she was the Secretary of State. She was doing favors in return for these donations. She got caught with her illegal home server. She took hammers to the devices, she bleach bit it, she destroyed the evidence, obstruction of justice, right? Here's the problem. That server was almost certainly hacked by our adversaries, including Russia. And what they were worried about with the Clinton campaign, with the Obama White House, with Joe Biden, was that this server would get leaked before the 2016 election by the Russians. And so what did they do? They made up the Steele dossier at Perkins Coie, a national law firm. They used that Steele dossier, just made up corrupt evidence. They gave it to the intel agencies, the Justice Department. They used that to get illegal spy warrants from the FISA courts on President Trump, on his campaign. They continued to spy on him as the president of the United States. They hobbled his presidency. And they did this Crossfire Hurricane for the purpose of this. If this evidence came out before the 2016 election, Hillary Clinton can say you can't trust it. This is a campaign dirty trick by the Trump campaign colluding with the Russians. And you say, oh, Mike, that sounds crazy. How can you be such a conspiracy theorist? Well, they did the same thing in 2020 with Hunter Biden's laptop of the Biden family corruption. You had the CIA working with 51 former intel officials to say it had all the hallmarks of a Russian disinformation campaign. They got the New York Post canceled from the internet. They got it deplatformed. America's continuous oldest newspaper got canceled from social media. The link got taken off the internet, and they did the same thing in 2020. Remember, Trump declassified Crossfire Hurricane. It took 4 years. It was the day before he left office. Rick Grinnell finally got the job done after the FBI and the intel agencies, Justice Department fought him tooth and nail. They declassified Crossfire Hurricane the day before Trump left office. The FBI, the intel officials ran to White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows and said, you cannot publicly release this. It has sources and methods. You're going to violate the Privacy Act. This is a crime. So Mark Meadows, the day they left office, January 20th, 2021, sent a memo saying, okay, do your Privacy Act review and publicly release these documents. Well, guess what? They didn't do the Privacy Act review. They didn't publicly release these records. Instead, they did the Mar-a-Lago raid to go get back these Crossfire Hurricane records. And that led to Jack Smith's indictment with Judge Cannon. He didn't like the judge that he drew, so he brought another unprecedented indictment in D.C. against Trump. Unprecedented for the Justice Department to bring two separate indictments against the same defendant at the same time in two different venues. That's what Jack Smith did. They had these other Democrat prosecutors working with the Biden White House, like Fani Willis and Nathan Wade, billing his time to collude with the Biden White House 16 hours, $250 an hour for two meetings. Before they brought their indictment in Georgia, you had Matthew Colangelo deploy from the Biden-Harris Justice Department, the number 3 office, to Alvin Bragg's office, this Soros-funded DA, to bring the first indictment ever. They brought 4 indictments. This is clearly coordinated in collusion with the Biden White House. It's clear. Biden waived Trump's claim of executive privilege through his deputy White House counsel, Jonathan Sue, that led to Jack Smith's 2 indictments. Nathan Wade billing his time, Matthew Colangelo going from the Biden DOJ. Biden's hands are on all 4 of these indictments. There has to be a criminal probe of this, and it comes back to Crossfire Hurricane. Obama, Biden, Hillary, Comey, Jay Bratt, who's working for Jack Smith right now. All of these are deep state bad actors who were involved with Crossfire. Andrew Weissman, who are involved with Crossfire Hurricane, the biggest scandal in American history, and its cover-up. They spied on a presidential candidate. They spied on the president of the United States. They lied to the FISA court. This is the most explosive story in American history. It's going to come out when President Trump's back in office. That's why they tried to bankrupt him. That's why they tried to throw him in prison for life with 4 bogus indictments. That's why they tried to take him off the ballot unconstitutionally. That's why they tried to underfund his Secret Service protection and almost took off his head.
And see, Mike, this is why I want you to be Attorney General of the United States. I know you say you want to be a private citizen, but this is why. I'm being serious. I'm paying you a sincere compliment right now. I'm not just joking around about it. That's the kind of understanding of the lawfare that has been targeting President Trump. And President Trump, by the way, is representative of us. This is the kind of understanding we need if we're actually going to untangle this and reform these institutions and not just have a tit for tat. So let me ask you a question. If you are not going to do it, who do you think should be the Attorney General?
Mark Paoletta is by far my number 1 choice to be Attorney General or White House counsel. He is a good friend. He's been Clarence Thomas's best friend for 30 years. He helped Justice Clarence Thomas get on the Supreme Court. He's Clarence Thomas's biggest defender. Mark Paoletta is 62 years old. He doesn't need another job. He has a great wife who is a law firm partner. He's a successful lawyer. They have no debt. Their house paid off. Their kids are out of school. He can afford to do this. He has worked in the House as a lead congressional investigator. He's worked in the White House as a White House counsel. He's worked for the vice president. He's worked as the general counsel for the Office of Management and Budget. There's no one who is better qualified to do this. He's not young. He's not a politician. He's not going to be worried about his next job. He's bold. He's fearless. And he would be a great pick. Unlike me, Mark can actually get confirmed, and he would be a phenomenal Attorney General or White House counsel.
And he has no illusions, in a sense. And I know this sounds harsh, but I don't care because we won. But he has no illusions about being bipartisan, meaning he won't go soft on those who committed crimes?
I think he would take the view that anyone who violated the law must be prosecuted and nobody is above the law.
All right, that's what I like to hear. We'll invite him on the show. We'll reach out to him. We'll talk to him. Hopefully he is in talks with the Trump transition team right now. Mike Davis of the Article 3 Project. Guys, go check out Article 3 Project. A lot of you probably already have, but if you haven't, go over there, check it out, support Mike. Mike, thank you for being on the show. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Liz. I really appreciate it.